Yep, we have even more leaks about WWDC 2025 that I just had to make one more video ahead of the event. We are less than 2 days away from WWDC happening. We're so close that the Wikipedia mods are already getting prepared. We have some big, major, last-minute leaks, from big new features coming to iOS, big changes for iPadOS, some new leaks for visionOS, and a little personal rant about Apple's behavior this year. First, iOS 26. If you're wondering, by the way, why it's 26 and not 19, I explained that in my last video. But for iOS 26, the headlining feature is the new redesign internally referred to as Project Solarium. It's a system-wide redesign for all of Apple's platforms that's inspired by the glassy design of visionOS. But not only are we getting this major redesign, we're also getting some big new features. These leaks come from 9to5Mac, which have been incredibly accurate in the past. First, messages. We've talked about how RCS integration will be getting some upgrades this year, but outside of that, there will be a few more changes. First, automatic translation. Kind of self-explanatory. Basically, messages sent to you in a different language can automatically be translated into transcript. Pretty basic, but useful feature. And the second feature is polls. Just like WhatsApp, Telegram, or Slack, you can integrate polls into your group conversations. And Apple may actually integrate some Apple Intelligence into this as well, like automatically suggesting a poll based on the context of the conversation. Next, a pretty cool feature for Apple Music. Now, there will be full-screen animated artwork on your lock screen. Animated artwork in Apple Music has existed since iOS 17, but now you can see that artwork on your lock screen in iOS 26. A little nice touch. Next, CarPlay. We just got the release of the new CarPlay Ultra UI in Aston Martin vehicles recently, but in iOS 26, CarPlay and CarPlay Ultra will both be redesigned to match the new Solarium redesign. This isn't really surprising, but it's good to see corroborated. In addition, the Notes app will support Markdown export, which is a niche but nice feature. And partway through me scripting this video, Mark Gurman and MacRumors dropped even more info. For one, Gurman looks to have corroborated John Prosser's leak of the camera app getting a more organized design. Apple is also bringing custom backgrounds in Messages finally, and you can even use Image Playground to generate backgrounds as well. The preview app from the Mac is also coming to both iOS and iPadOS, and it'll primarily be used for PDFs on these platforms. There will also be an upgrade to Genmoji that will allow you to combine two emoji into one, and Apple is actually going to be calling this Mixmoji. Yup, I'm not fucking kidding. The Shortcuts app will also be updated to allow you to generate custom shortcuts with Apple Intelligence. And Apple will be opening up their Apple Intelligence models to developers, so they can integrate their own custom AI features using Apple's own models. As for supported devices, it's been once again confirmed that iPhone 11 and newer will be supported. The iPhone XS and XR will be dropped. And funny enough, this means that exactly 26 iPhones will be supported by iOS 26. I'm not joking. Shout out to Riley's tweet sesh for finding that one. But in addition to all of that, AirPods will be getting some big upgrades with iOS 26. First, some new head gestures. Last year, Apple added head gestures for AirPods Pro 2 and AirPods 4, where you can nod your head yes or shake your head no to answer or decline a call. But this year, Apple will be adding the ability to adjust the conversation awareness volume with just your head. In addition, if you sleep with your AirPods, Apple will be adding auto pause for sleep. This will likely work in tandem with sleep tracking on the Apple Watch, however, but it will still be pretty cool. And not only that, Apple will be adding the ability to use your AirPods as a camera remote for your iPhone. You'll be able to just force press on your stem and take a photo. And last, Apple will be integrating audio mix from the iPhone 16 into the AirPods mic as well. This is very weird, as the AirPods mics kind of suck, along with just about every pair of Bluetooth headphones. But we'll have to see how well this is implemented. Next, iPadOS 26. iPadOS has been rumored to get some big new multitasking upgrades to make it more Mac-like, and that looks to be the case, but you'll need to hook up your iPad to something like a Magic Keyboard or some form of a keyboard case or keyboard and mouse in general. And the Apple Pencil will be getting an upgrade to feature a new digital read calligraphy pen. In addition, the Preview app is also coming to iPadOS as well, and most of the other features from iOS 26. Next, visionOS 26. Today, as I'm writing this script, so this is already outdated, but recently was the 2-year anniversary of when Apple announced Vision Pro at WWDC 2023. This year, visionOS 26 is said to be a very feature-packed release for Apple Vision Pro. Keep in mind that this is likely the OS to ship on the cheaper, consumer-focused Apple Vision headset coming later this year or early next year. In visionOS 26, Apple is apparently going to lean very heavily into one of the biggest use cases for a VR headset, gaming, as at the end of the day, that's what Vision Pro is. Apple is rumored to bring full support for PSVR 2 controllers to visionOS, and even full support for Xbox and PlayStation controllers. This is definitely paving towards a major gaming push for visionOS, which would be very fitting for the cheaper Apple Vision headset. This is also combined with Apple's rumored game launcher app coming to iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and now visionOS as well. Now, specifically with the Mac, you may have heard of Apple's game porting toolkit. Basically, this allows game devs to port over their Windows games to the Mac with full support for Metal 3. And last year, with the Game Porting Toolkit 2, Apple even made it so that game devs can port their games over to iPhones and iPads with 8 gigs of RAM or more. And likely at WWDC, Game Porting Toolkit 3 could allow for VR game devs to port over their games to visionOS, which would be pretty cool. Before I close out, let me discuss this. I mentioned this in a YouTube short, but I think it needs to be mentioned here. Apple's absolutely fucking pathetic behavior this year. In case you missed it, renowned Apple analyst John Gruber from Daring Fireball holds this event every year after WWDC called the Talk Show Live from WWDC. It's a live show hosted by John that has even featured Apple execs every year since 2015. He's invited on Craig Federighi, Greg Joswiak, or Jaws, Phil Schiller, Mike Rockwell, John Turnus, and most recently John Gianandrea, or JG. But this year, Apple has declined being associated with this event for the first time in a decade. And that's likely because back in March, Gruber posted a very well-written article titled "Something is Rotten in the State of Cupertino," basically deep diving into the absolute mess of launch and rollout Apple Intelligence had over the past year. Because of that article, Apple's probably very afraid of what Gruber has to say this time around. And let's be real, this past year in general has been a clusterfuck for Apple software, with probably the buggiest experience since iOS 11. Combining all of that together, we can definitely agree that this past year has not been very strong for Apple. But given all of this, Apple should be listening to what the critics have to say so they can improve upon themselves. But instead, they're ignoring what the critics have to say, which is a very stupid decision on Apple's end. If anything, this has now opened up more eyes on the situation, because Gruber isn't canceling the talk show live this year because Apple declined. He's still going to hold it, just with different guests. And you can bet your sweet ass that they're going to dive in very deeply into this situation during the show. But even before this show has happened, just by Gruber announcing this info, this has already sparked a mass amount of fair criticism towards Apple, and has already left a bad mark on Apple's brand image over the past few weeks. Look, I'm very sick and tired of people saying Steve Jobs would have never let this happen. I think that phrase has been very overused and especially misused, but I'm just going to point this out. Back in 1998, when Apple introduced the original iMac, they introduced the Puck mouse, and this mouse has been rightfully ridiculed for its immensely poor ergonomic design. So much so that on stage, when announcing its successor in 2000, Steve Jobs literally showed a review from a critic saying that it's the worst mouse they've ever used. Now, I'm not saying for Apple to go back to that level. I'm saying just be open and fair to the criticism you hear from these critics, because that's how you improve upon themselves. Ignoring them is not the right call. In fact, it's clearly already backfired, and the event hasn't even happened yet. I hope Apple can recover and learn from this very bad misstep in the future, because I have never seen their PR team handle things this poorly before. So there you go. That's some last minute leaks ahead of WWDC. This is very likely my last video before the event on Monday, unless something else majorly leaks. You know how it can be. And as per yearly tradition, I will be streaming myself installing iOS 26 right after the event, so make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for when that happens. Let me know what you're most excited for in the comments. See you guys on Monday.